Welcome everybody to, hang on, we've got somebody got their, is you? Okay. Just reminded me I haven't turned my sound off either. Yes, welcome to the Planning Committee for the 5th of December. I'm Councillor Phil Murphy, Chair of the committee. Dale?
Councillor Dale Rook, I'm the Vice Chair.
Craig O'Connor, Head of Planning for Monmouthshire County Council.
Philip Thomas, Development Services Manager for the Council.
Andrew Jones, Development Management Area Team Manager.
Paige Mosley, Solicitor to Planning Committee. Anna Hawker, Training Solicitor.
Richard Williams, Democratic Services.
Thank you, everybody. Can I remind everybody online to keep your cameras on, please, so that you can qualify to vote. And if you want to speak, put your hands up function in the chat rather than on your taskbar. We go to the agenda now. Richard, do we have any apologies for absence?
Just one apology, Chair, from Councillor Eason.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest, Councillor McKenna.
Yeah, could I declare a personal interest on item 4B on the agenda, please? I'll leave the chamber and not take part in the debate or the vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I need to declare a personal non-prejudicial interest in the same application, as my son used to be a work colleague of the applicant. But I shall be continuing in the meeting. Can we go to the accuracy now of the minutes of the previous meeting? Can I have anybody propose that we accept them? Thank you, Councillor McConnell, and seconded Councillor Pell. Thank you very much. We go to the planning applications now, and I'm going to take them not in the order that they're on the agenda. We'll go to item 4.2 first, which is application DM 2023/01105, which is an application in respect of Bushes Farm, Chapel Road, Earlswood, and the officer presenting that is Phil Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Right, just trying to get this moving. There we go. Right, lovely. So this application is described as proposed amendments to previous planning permission DC 2018-00128 to incorporate minor amendments to approved alterations, including a side and rear extension, amended back provision, and alteration of ground levels. So this is the site here. It's one some of us looked at yesterday. It's broadly in the Earlswood area in open countryside. Previously, planning permission was granted under that application, DC 2018-00128, for the, and I'll quote, rehabilitation of farmhouse to dwelling, unquote, at this site, which is, as I said, in the open countryside near Earlswood. That permission was approved in accordance with LDP policy H4, which allows the conversion / rehabilitation of a building in the open countryside for residential use, subject to certain criteria being met. The supporting adopted supplementary planning guidance to this policy notes that the term rehabilitation relates to situations where an old cottage or dwelling has become abandoned in planning terms. That means a former dwelling that has lost its residential use, normally because of its dilapidated condition or that it's been put into an alternative use. But in this instance, clearly that would be because of its condition, and there is evidence that it was used in the past for agricultural storage, so that would have been an alternative use, which meant its use rights were lost, but certainly its condition meant it was abandoned in planning terms. And there is then a need of intervention via conversion to change the use back to a habitable dwelling. So importantly, criterion C of this key policy, policy H4, relates to the structural integrity of the building to be converted or rehabilitated. Substantial rebuilding or reconstruction works to enable a rural conversion to a residential use will not be permitted. This would be tantamount to a new build dwelling in the open countryside, contrary to established national and local planning policy, including policy S1 of the Local Development Plan, which sets out that new housing in the open countryside will only be allowed in exceptional circumstances, one of which involves the acceptable conversions of rural buildings in the circumstances set out in policy H4. Paragraph 3.9 of the adopted supplementary planning guidance to policy H4 states that generally the building should be capable of conversion without the need for rebuilding or reconstruction works. In some instances, however, a small amount of rebuilding reconstruction may be necessary to facilitate a rural conversion to take place. Approval for this will depend on the nature and extent of the works, due to the potential impact on the existing character and structural integrity of the building. Any such works will be considered on a case-by-case basis and should be detailed on the submitted plans. The advice also says that, and quote, once conversion work is commenced, great care must be taken to ensure that the conversion works do not result in the collapse of the existing building structure, which would result in the need for rebuilding works not permitted under the original planning permission. A further planning application would be required for any additional works. Substantial reconstruction, however, would be resisted, as this would be tantamount to a new build dwelling in the open countryside, unquote. So in this instance, a relatively limited degree of rebuilding was allowed under application DC 2018, as set out in the structural report to that application, and as agreed within the terms of that planning permission. However, what has occurred on site is the loss of the original building, and what is now proposed is a rebuild to form a new dwelling in the countryside, contrary to established planning policy. As set out in the adopted supplementary planning guidance, this substantial reconstruction is a new build dwelling in the open countryside at odds with long-established planning policy. The latest version of Planning Policy Wales sets out that new building in the open countryside, away from existing settlements or areas allocated for development in development plans, must continue to be strictly controlled. In addition to this fundamental point of principle, there is also a proposed increase in the curtilage. If you can see my cursor, let me just, it's the land to the north of the building proposed to be restored. That slopes upwards, and some of it is actually a site of interest for nature conservation, but it's the landscape impact of that increase in the curtilage compared to the original approval, which was more tighter to the northern edge of the elevation of the building, that causes concern from a landscape point of view in terms of the impact of domestic paraphernalia that could be associated with a domestic use on that land. We're thinking of play equipment, washing lines, etc. The other concern is that there's a lack of a Section 106 agreement or unilateral undertaking to provide an affordable housing contribution, which you'd expect for an application of this character. So consequently, officers cannot support this proposal on planning policy grounds. The basis of approving previous application TC 2018-00128 under policy H4, which supports the conversion of intrinsically attractive older buildings in the countryside as a valuable resource to sustain, has been lost by the execution of the work on site. That planning permission can no longer be exercised for the conversion and rehabilitation of the building to residential use, which was the only manner in which a dwelling could be established, or re-established in this case, on the land. So, and as such, the proposal is recommended for refusal for the 3 reasons set out on page 26 of the agenda. I'll just take you through the slides before we open up the debate. So that's a survey of the building as it is currently. Members will have seen that on site yesterday, and in a lot of the photographic material that's been presented to them over the past few weeks. That's the building on site. You see that the stonework is being reused to clad the outside of the blockwork walls. That's the rear. You see the land was removed from the back of the building to create to get easier access to reconstruct the rear elevation. It's looking down from the back, the rear of the property. Again, the rear. Foundations. Rear again. And then that's the proposal, which is a new build. In the front. That's the rear. Floor plans. Then that's the previous scheme. That shows the original building before building work started. And then those are the floor plans. You can see the curtilage up in the top was tighter to the actual building itself and extended then to the west as we're looking on that plan, and then back round. And then that's the conversion itself, rehabilitation that was allowed with very limited rebuilding work. And those are the summary of the points relating to this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And with the local member, Councillor Louise Brown is here. Councillor Brown, you have 4 minutes and 2 to sum up at the end if you wish. Alternatively, you can take 6 minutes now.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think I would just repeat some of the things that were within the report. The Shire Newton Community Council doesn't object to the application, but then they suggest particular conditions like similar ones to the ones in the 2018 application, and work limited to normal working hours, which is set out in the report on page 18 and 19. But obviously there have been 1 or 2 public objections as well, and they related to concerns about disturbance of the bat colony, and also they're listed on page 21 and 22, and also the use of materials in the construction of a new access road that could lead to potentially harmful runoff flowing through the SINC. The local concerns have mentioned about the construction of the new access road across an area designated as a SINC. Basically, there's been a track across the road of 3 or 4 metres in width and 150 metres approximately in length. That's obviously just local estimates, but you know, I would like the applicant to consider whether or not, regardless of what the outcome of this application is, whether that could be rectified, because that's meadow land. The reason that this was referred to Planning Committee was because on the one hand the Shire Newton Community Council took a pragmatic view, which was on the basis that it would be better to have something there as opposed to just demolition material, and the need for younger people in the village. But also obviously there's public objections as well. And I have some sympathy with the applicant in terms of the fact that I believe that the property was bought at auction on the basis of some residential planning consent for the 2018 application. But I do have a number of questions as well, because I'm concerned about, and perhaps the planning officer could answer this, does the footprint of the 2018 application for residential development of the old farmhouse compare to the footprint of this application? And if so, what's the percentage difference? I'm also concerned that we've only got details of the sewage package, and it doesn't, I'm concerned about where it's related in relation to any pollution to the brook or the watercourse. Is the applicant now willing to consider an affordable housing contribution, and will the applicant make good the unauthorised large tract across meadowland, and when would that be done? I think obviously this is a difficult decision, because on the one hand the policy side of this is quite clear, but on the other hand I do have some sympathy for the applicant in terms of the fact that this land was purchased at auction as land with some planning permission for residential use of the old farmhouse. So I think it's going to be a question of listening to the applicant to see what the applicant says. I don't know if he's here or not, is he?
Yes, he is,
Yeah.
and you've had your 4 minutes, unless you wish
and then
to extend.
if you could come back to me at the end when I've listened to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Phil?
Yeah, in terms of the points raised by Councillor Brown, in terms of the footprint of the building, I haven't got the percentage increase. It is largely in accordance with the layout of the previous scheme. It's slightly different in that, as you look at the front of the building on the left-hand side, the extension that's proposed now is orientated differently. It's more perpendicular to the building. The other one was more of a linear extension that sat on the end. So that's slightly larger. There's also a corridor on the back of the building, which means there's an extension at the back, which allows a communication corridor, if you like, to run along the length of the building, because it's obviously looks like an old Welsh longhouse the way it's designed, and indeed that's what the building was originally. So there is a small increase in the footprint, but I haven't got that figure to hand, I'm afraid. Obviously, the point we're trying to make is, it's not looked at under H5, sorry, which is replacement dwelling policy in terms of the volume increase. It's looked at under policy H4, and our argument is there's no building there to rehabilitate, if you like. The original building's gone. So you don't look at it under H5, you look at it under policy H4 for the conversion, rehabilitation of buildings. In terms of the private sewage treatment plant, that is proposed in the application form. We haven't got any details of that under the current application. What I would say is there's lots of scope there to actually provide a private treatment plant with soakaways, which wouldn't impinge upon the brook, which is towards the lower end. It's about 50 metres away, I think, isn't it, the brook itself? But I think there's plenty of scope, really, and the water from the sewage treatment plant would be of a standard that would be treated and would be clean runoff, so it shouldn't harm the brook in that respect. The affordable housing contribution would be expected, but there's, as far as I'm aware, there's no offer of that, and that would be a matter for the applicant to come forward on that. And the track is a separate issue. It's not part of this actual proposal. I think there's, Andrew, if you can correct me, is there enforcement against the track, enforcement or consideration of enforcement action? Sorry.
Yeah, there is an open case, but no formal action has been taken.
Yeah. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Phil. We've got nobody registered to speak from the Community Council or objectors, but the applicant is here, wishes to address the committee. So, Mr. Wells, if you'd like to come down.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you directly on this application. The stakes could not be higher for me and my family. We purchased Bushes Farm last year with a residential planning permission that was granted in 2018. That was crucial, as this 200-year-old farmhouse was in a pretty distressed state when we bought it. While there wasn't much mortar, the stone walls were at least bound together with ivy. The idea of refurbishing this property and raising our young family in this idyllic valley appealed to my wife and I, but in hindsight we probably glossed over some practical construction issues. In early 2022, a pre-app consultation for an extension took place with the same planning officer, and we felt encouraged by the generally supportive feedback with scope to suit our family's needs. Last summer, works got underway on the approved 2018 scheme, and we had begun by underpinning the walls with foundations and injecting mortar into the walls to stabilise them. Despite this, there was unfortunately a catastrophic collapse. Thankfully, no one was injured. My huge investment in a family home literally crumbled before my eyes. I took the decision to build back the collapsed walls along with a modest extension. I reused the stones for the outer walls on a like-for-like basis and maintained the original openings. I did use thermal block work for the inner leaf, as I've seen done on countless rescued barns in Monmouthshire. I reasoned that it would make for a more sustainable home with elevations true to the 200-year-old original. It was at this point council officers appeared on site accusing me of breaching planning permission. Reportedly, officers commented that I was now the owner of some very expensive fields. To be honest, my world fell apart. I'd sold my family home, invested all my money, as well as borrowing substantially to resurrect the farmhouse for my pregnant wife and our 2-year-old son. The stress and toll that this gave is huge. Nevertheless, I complied fully with the council's request to stop work and imagined, perhaps naively, that a reasonable outcome might be achieved. I've been shocked by how little balance has been shown by officers in their dealings with this application. The officer's report is one-sided and ignores crucial facts and submissions made by my consultants. I've watched in horror as the council's consultations have been amended at the officer's request to reach more damning conclusions. My allotted time is too brief to debunk much of what's been misstated, which, if accepted, would condemn Bushes Farm to be in a ruin with a caravan on site becoming permanent. However, I hope you will weigh the crucial facts set out in my consultant's letter rather than simply accepting the officer's report as the final word. The only changes proposed to the farmhouse are a modest, well-designed extension. The rest will be visually indistinguishable from the original. The extension was initially praised by the planners, who immediately recognised the well-regarded local architect's work, and it was judged to be comfortably within acceptable size and design parameters. The gold standard bat house was also seen as an enhancement. This application has the full support of Shire Newton Community Council, who voted to approve the scheme. They recognise the reality of the situation and the value of retaining an attractive stone farmhouse that has been in Earlswood since the early 1800s with a young family living in it. They do not accept the officer's condemnation that this is a newly built dwelling in the countryside, and that they clearly see that the alternative, which sacrifices a family home and leaves an unsightly pile of stone and a permanent caravan, highly undesirable. I ask that sound reasoning and, frankly, some human decency is brought to bear on your decision today. I hope you will support this application, which is not for a new build dwelling in the countryside, but for a carefully designed extension to enable the farmhouse to be resurrected as a family home. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. I don't think there's any officer comment at this stage. So we'll move to... okay, thanks, Mike. We move to members now. Can I give members my usual request that we stick to planning issues here? First one on my list is Councillor Bonfield.
Hi, thanks, Chair, and thank you, Phil, for the presentation and also for the applicant's presentation also. This is a really, really complex application that was given previous approval under policy H4 of the LDP, and that due to exceptional circumstances associated with refurbishing dilapidated properties, the policy has changed to LC1. I know, Phil, you said that we were measuring it against H4, but that's not what the officer report says. It does state that it's switched to LC1. I do worry about the effect this is having on a young family's mental health. And although I know it is not within any policy, I think it is something we as an authority and a local planning authority and a committee need to be mindful of. I will be supporting this application today. I think the application does comply with policy LC1, which states, although well-designed schemes can often conserve and enhance biodiversity and landscape quality, there is potential to cause negative impacts. It is essential, therefore, that any such development is not at the expense of environmental considerations, including landscape, biodiversity, local amenity, and historic, cultural, or geological heritage. Where the only option is to provide a new building, careful attention should be given to siting, design, and materials to minimise impacts on nature conservation and the surrounding landscape. The policy sets out strict criteria for assessing such proposals and seeks to ensure that in exceptional circumstances where a new built development may be permitted in the countryside, there are no adverse impacts on the environment. Sorry, I've lost my place. Members, it appears to me that the only option following a catastrophic collapse was to build a new dwelling. These are exceptional circumstances, and for that reason, I do believe this application complies with the policy. The new building will not have a negative impact on neighbours' amenity, the landscape, or any wildlife, so I can't see any grounds to refuse this application. The officer has stated the change of use of this elevated land and the inevitable domestic paraphernalia would be detrimental to the rural character of the area and would be contrary to the policies LC1 and LC5 of the LDP. However, I believe that refusing this application would be more detrimental to the landscape and the character of the area. Also, is it possible for us to reduce the size of the curtilage so it is not such a concern to officers? I do believe this is overkill, though as there are no close neighbours, no impact on amenity and not visible from the highway. I welcome the design and especially the use of stone cladding, being that of the original stone from the dilapidated farmhouse. I think it is sympathetic to the landscape and will not be out of place in the rural setting, thus complying with policy LC5, which states development will be permitted provided it would not have an unacceptable adverse effect on the special character or quality of Monmouthshire's landscape. I am mindful that as the building stands, it is not compliant with objectives A, B, E and F of policy LC5, as it is currently a scarring on the landscape, and I fear that PEDU could overturn a refusal should the applicants go to appeal, which I suspect they will should we refuse this application today. I welcome there will be a purpose-built bat house on site, considering we are in a nature and climate emergency, and this is in accordance with the objectives set out in Planning Policy Wales and those of our own policies. I believe that other concerns raised within the report, such as water runoff, lighting, landscaping and tree protection, can all be controlled via conditions should members agree to approve this application today. I would also like to condition the securing of 106 contribution if members are also minded to approve the application. In short, I believe this application is compliant with national policies and our own policies, so I would like to recommend that this application is approved this afternoon. Thank you. Sorry, I can't speak today.
Okay, Faye, thanks for that. Officers, there were several references to policies there. Do you want to come in on those before we continue?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of policies, Policy H4 is how this building was originally approved in 2018, and that's the only way a new build, not a new build, a new dwelling in the countryside would have been allowed as a conversion / rehabilitation of the building. So what we're left with now, because the original building is not there, you have to look at it under Policy LC1 of the local development plan. And that says that there's a presumption against new built development in the open countryside unless it's required for rural enterprise, agriculture or tourism, and even then it's subject to strict criteria. So in this instance, this is just if you've in effect a private home. It's not rural enterprise dwelling, so it's not been packaged as that. So we're not looking at it in terms of us being able to support it under Policy LC1 in that guise, or under TAN 6 for a rural enterprise dwelling. It is just a private dwelling, so it wouldn't satisfy Policy LC1 in terms of it being a new build in the open countryside, which is how we'd have to look at it in this instance. In terms of the other issues, whether the applicant is prepared to make an affordable housing contribution, that would be a matter for them. And if members did vote to approve the application or defer it for approval, then we'd have to go back to the applicant to explore that issue. But our firm advice, obviously, is that it's not acceptable under Policy LC1. It would be a new build development in the open countryside, which there's long-established policy presuming against. The curtilage issue is again a matter for the members, but our advice is that it does extend the curtilage unacceptably, and it's a very large curtilage, and much larger than you'd expect for a building of this nature and scale. I don't know if there's anything else. I mean, what I would like to get across as well, we're not coming at this from a callous point of view. We are applying the policy. We do sympathise with the applicant. They have they bought the property in good faith. Unfortunately, the way the conversion was taken forward, the building is not there. How that's been done, we weren't on site at the time, so I can't go into that. But unfortunately, the building isn't around anymore, and we have to look at it really under current policy. And there's a very firm and established framework to say that new build development in the open countryside and supported by the exceptions policy, such as a rural enterprise dwelling, is simply not acceptable in policy terms. It's very black and white policy framework in that regard. We do sympathise, but we as officers certainly have got to apply the policy as it's written. It's a really long established policy and is unlikely to change in the future, to be honest with you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Phil. And Councillor Garrett.
Yeah, we all received a letter from the applicant's architect dated 4th of December. I just wonder whether the officers are they able to provide any comments on some of the points that are made about the officer's report and other areas of disagreement, just so we've got a bit of a clearer picture.
Phil, do you want to come back into that?
Well, yeah, there were quite a few different points, really. I can't go into them all in detail, but we just simply will have to agree to disagree, really, in terms of the interpretation of what's happened, the policy framework, and how you would look to take it forward. For instance, we don't agree with the description of development that the applicant's agent has come up with. It's effectively a new build dwelling in the open countryside, because there is no original building to extend. It's being rebuilt. So rather than describe it as extensions, for instance, we wouldn't agree with that. We also think that it was quite clear, the 2018 permission, that it was a rehabilitation of the existing building, and that there was a structural report with it that was quite clear that there was only very limited rebuild involved to secure the building and create a home. So there are aspects of that which we simply just don't agree with, really, and I think sometimes never the twain shall meet. I think that's putting it simply.
Councillor Bryn.
Diolch. I must say, I am a bit concerned that if we approve what is essentially a new residential dwelling in the open countryside, it will go completely against current national and local policies put into place to protect the landscape. One Planet Developments must adhere to extremely strict criteria for the whole of their lifetimes in order to ensure sustainability and to protect the landscape, nature and biodiversity. How can we insist on this with one hand and allow for large private new builds with extended curtilages in the open countries, in open countryside elsewhere? Much as I have sympathy with the applicant in this instance, I would struggle to approve this. Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Bryn. I think those points have been adequately covered by officers. So, Councillor Butler.
Yes, thank you. I'm probably going to say much of the same thing. I do have sympathy for the applicant who gave a detailed and graphic account of the demise of the original building. And I do wonder, actually, at that point, whether if he had sought advice from planning at that time, whether the outcome might have been different. You know, because I can perfectly understand if, as has been described, the building fell down of its own accord, pretty much, would the outcome be any different?
Phil?
Just the point I wanted to make, really.
Craig, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Butler, for the comments. Would the outcome be different? I think it's a difficult situation in that if at the time of the collapse and the information that members have been given from the applicant and their agents, if members of the planning office and the building control office had gone out at that time, looked and reassessed and seen what could have been salvaged of that structure, there may have been a different outcome. I think we'll never know that now, unfortunately. We have to deal with this in planning policy terms, ultimately, as officers and as the planning committee. And again, I would reiterate what my colleague has said. We completely sympathise with Mr Wells and his family and the situation that's in, but we have to be consistent in terms of the approach with regards to new build development within the open countryside. And as Phil has said, there is long established principles here which we do not allow new build development, particularly residential development, unless it's justified by national planning policy. Unfortunately, as outlined in the report, the building is lost and the building control officers have been on site. They've given you the evidence that the structure is new. Therefore, where is the policy justification as to how we can support this application? Unfortunately, there isn't any policy justification. It is worth noting to members that the applicants will have the opportunity to appeal this decision if planning committee are recommended to refuse the application. If we withhold consent today, there is that independent review by an inspector who will look at this and consider it in significant detail as well. So I am quite clear that this is contrary to your local development plan, and we're recommending based on the planning policies, and unfortunately we are unable to support this, and I hope members will be able to see the rationale as to why that is.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. I just really want to take a little bit of middle ground conversation here, because, as Craig has said, it's a difficult situation with lots of ifs. It seems that this was bought in good faith with planning consent some time ago, but bought more recently, I'm guessing after more deterioration. The current policy is intended to protect the environment and the open countryside. We don't know how or why the building has collapsed, although we can speculate. However, we are where we are now. Will the open countryside benefit from, as the applicant has described, a pile of rubbish or pile of rubble on a long-term caravan on site? How will that benefit the open countryside?
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Do you want to come back in, Craig?
If I could, please, Chair. Councillor Riley, thanks for the query in terms of where is the middle ground. Unfortunately, there isn't much middle ground. Ultimately, this is new build. I think we have to start looking at it in black and white in that respect, in terms of the structure, the previous structure has gone. This is now a new build development, and we have to deal with it in that planning policy framework. In terms of what's left there, arguably it shouldn't be there in the first place because it's new build. So it could be left, it could be a great ecological habitat. I can't speculate in terms of what will happen. I mean, presuming, I would imagine, and this would be my advice to the applicant, is to appeal the decision if planning committee decides to refuse it, and then there's that process to go through. But in the long term, we need to protect our countryside by ensuring we don't have managed new built development in the open countryside. And effectively, by not refusing this application, we're not being consistent in our approach in terms of how we speak to all of our customers who engage in the planning service, is that we don't allow new built development in the open countryside. So we have to be consistent in that planning policy approach and protect our countryside from unauthorised development, which effectively this is, because it is new build.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chair. I am really concerned about this family, and I'd like to ask the question really, why this applicant is in the position he is in. Surely we have had planning inspectors visiting the site, and I just wondered whether communications have been as they should be between the applicant and the planning officers, certainly putting the applicant in the picture as to what should be done and what shouldn't be done through the process.
Craig?
Yeah, we have been in constant communication with the applicant, and planning consent was granted to convert the original building. What's happened in between is the building has gone. I can't explain how that's happened or what has happened there. Everyone can speculate, but you know, we are always here to speak to anyone and to advise people as to how to move forwards if they contact us.
Councillor Hells.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, like everyone here, I've got great sympathy for this young family. Does the structure have potential to be put back in its original form, or is that moment now gone?
We have to stick to planning policy with regards to not allowing any new development in the open countryside. So there is no building to convert ultimately, so there's new build.
Councillor Birch.
When the approval was made in 2018, I understand that there was no method statement attached to that condition. Now, when you take on the responsibility for a historic building, obviously you have great duty to undertake any work on it in such a way that it doesn't fall down. And looking at the pictures of that building when in 2018 and in 2022, it looks as though it was a building that was going to be of considerable difficulty and complexity to restore. Nevertheless, that was, you know, clearly the duty to keep it upright and restore it in such a way that it could then be repaired and extended as per the permission. But when a demolition takes place or a building is allowed to fall down, generally the penalty that is then put in place is that the applicant has the responsibility to rebuild it as it was. Now, looking at this application in terms of the extension to the building, the extensions to the building, I think, are more in keeping with the building original form than the original application. And the end result of the application would be a house built to contemporary energy standards and an attractive property which largely replicates the original farmhouse. So on balance, I find that I cannot agree with the recommendation here to refuse it, because I think if we approve the application, the end result will be a modern an energy efficient home, which in appearance replicates the original farmhouse. Whereas if we refuse it, the end result will be a half completed pile of rubble. So I think this is a very difficult one, because what we don't want to do is give any kind of carte blanche to people across the county to think that they can knock down a historic building and do as they please. But it shouldn't have happened, but we are where we are.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Birch.
Yeah, in terms of that, I mean, there is no right for an applicant to therefore, if a building collapses, for them to rebuild it. Particularly in this instance, it's an open countryside. The only way a dwelling would have been allowed to be established there, or re-established, because there was a dwelling there many, many moons ago, but it was abandoned, is through a conversion. If you've not got the building to convert anymore because it's collapsed, you've lost your planning permission, which is why this is a new application, effectively, which seeks a new dwelling in the countryside. And then you have to look at it under the current planning framework, rather than there was a building there, it's going to look exactly the same, it's great. You know, we haven't got an actual issue with the design of the building. It's very well designed, it's very well, Martin Hall's very well-respected architect, he's award-winning architect. But that's not the point. The point is the building, the principle of the building is not acceptable now, because the use rights, there's no residential use rights there at all now. So it would be a new building in the open countryside, which is contrary to well-established planning policy. So that's the point we're trying to get across as officers.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah, I understand the argument, yeah.
Okay, I've got nobody else wishing to speak. So we have a recommendation before us for refusal. Is somebody prepared to propose refusal?
I will, Chair.
You, Councillor Brooks, seconded by Councillor Powell. Richard, can we have the voting function up, please? Okay, we got that up now, so can everybody vote no, please? We got one. Oh, that was Jane.
Okay, so that is refused, 11 for refusal and 3 against refusal.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We now move on to the next item, which is item 4.1 in the agenda, DM 2022-01507, with regards to a drop-off area. Oh, yeah, yeah. Do you want to go and get Councillor McKenna? Drop-off area with Kevin Tiller Court. And as soon as Councillor McKenna comes back in, we'll start to look at that. Okay, this one is being presented by Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just wait for the slides. Okay, great. So, yeah, this is a full application for the change of use of land to provide an overflow car park and minibus drop-off area in connection with a wedding venue at Kevin Tiller Court, Llandeni. And just to confirm, members, the application is presented to you today as a committee as the threshold of 5 objections has been received. And while some of the members will have seen the site during yesterday's rather wet site visit. The benefit of those that weren't with us, I'll just quickly now run through the slides, including the site photographs. So that's the first one there, just shows the site in the red circle. It's just to the south of the main village of Llendenny. You get a better view of it in context on the next slide. So yeah, it's just positioned just below a northern access entryway to Cefn Court, and the extent is, say, shown in red on the right-hand side of the screen. So looking at the site, now this is stood looking effectively in a northerly direction. You can see there the existing access gate arrangements which to be retained, and then there's the large agricultural building positioned at the sort of most northerly point of the application site. Just turning to the next photograph. That's stood looking effectively south. Again, you can see the existing access and entry arrangements. And the car parking area proposed would be, if you stood in front of the gates, just to your right-hand side, down towards an existing bund. So that's just a better view there of the existing agricultural building at the top end of the site. And just to confirm, no works proposed to that building as part of this planning application. It's for the use of the land and provision of parking spaces. Just turning to the next slide. So this shows the helpful before and after. You can see there that's the building we've just seen in the photographs to the north. What is now proposed on the right is, you can see there the additional soft landscaping is proposed. There are the 20 motor vehicle spaces. There would also be provision for 3 minibuses that would run in a sort of shuttle arrangement to enter the site and provide services back and forth to the wedding venue, which is located to the west. I think that may be the final of the plans. So just to go through the principle of the development before us. So the proposal is an ancillary use to an existing established use within the open countryside. And the location of the overflow car park has been very carefully considered, and this is owing to the particular heritage designations of the wedding venue, and I'll discuss this point further on. However, the development is considered by officers to be acceptable in principle, and I will now run through some of the key material planning considerations, and these are namely landscape and the historic environment, highway safety and biodiversity. So firstly, in terms of landscape and the historic environment, the siting of the car park has been chosen with particular regard to the significant Grade 2 star status of Cefn Court, as well as the site being adjacent to the historic park and garden. The proposed site forms part of a parcel of land that has already been built upon via the large agricultural building and informal hard surfacing that surrounds it. The scheme has been subject to amendment following comments and advice taken from the Council's landscape officer. And as you'll have seen on the previous block plan, new planting is now to be provided with full details to be managed via appropriate planning condition. The site features 2 trees that are protected by tree preservation orders. These are to be retained, and again conditions are proposed to provide full details to ensure that these are protected during the course of the works. In addition, and having regard again to landscape, all hard surface finishes are to be submitted for approval prior to development commencing, and this would be done again by a planning condition. And on the point of hard surfacing, just to clarify, a separate application to the Council's SAB team would be required, having regard to the surface area, for sustainable drainage approval under their consenting regime. In terms of highway safety, members will have seen in local correspondence that objections received by members of the public with regard to the original proposal, and this would have seen coaches used as opposed to minibuses. And that is a material difference from office perspective, and that the minibuses would be smaller vehicles, and in addition to this, a transport statement has also been provided in support of the application. This has been reviewed in detail by the Council's highway engineer, who, based upon the information set out within this and the change from coaches to minibus, now offers no objection on highway safety grounds. The existing access is to be retained, which demonstrates visibility displays in excess of 100 metres in both directions. So based on the updated information, officers are of the opinion that the proposed overflow is for parking needs that's generated by an existing use. The use of the minibuses, as opposed to coaches, is welcomed. And so based on all the information in front of us and advice from our highway colleagues, officers are satisfied that the development now accords with the requirements of policy MV1 of the LDP. With regard to biodiversity, it's important to highlight that no trees or hedgerows would be lost as a result of development. Indeed, as I stated previously, more new planting will be provided. Bat and bird boxes are also to be provided on site as part of the ecological enhancements of the proposal. No external lighting is proposed as part of its application. However, given the sensitivity of the site in respect to both landscape and ecological value, a condition is proposed to remove normal permitted development rights in respect of lighting. Any lighting would require approval and would need to be of low-level PIR lighting. So in conclusion, the application has been subject to very detailed consideration by officers as well as our statutory consultees, and in particular our landscape officer and our highway engineer. So having regard to all planning policies and all other material considerations, subject to the conditions set out in your officer's report, it is recommended to you for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And I've had no response from the Community Council or the local member. Nobody's registered to speak. So we'll go straight to members, and Councillor Bonfield.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Andrew. Yeah, I agree. I think we should recommend this for approval. The officer's report has covered all the concerns that were raised, and the applicant has amended the application to a more acceptable and reasonable standard. I also welcome a landscaping scheme, and yeah, we need to support our local businesses in the current climate. So yeah, I'll be supporting this application today. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bryn.
Hi. As this is primarily an overflow car park and therefore likely to have long periods of time when it's not in use, might it be possible to condition a grasscrete or similar permeable surface solution that involves planting rather than gravel, so that the field maintains its green, open countryside appearance and benefits from improved biodiversity, particularly for invertebrates? And could we also condition that should lighting eventually be requested, that it's only used when the car park is in use, rather than just having, I know there's condition that maybe it's low lighting, but they'd be unnecessary for it to be lit even at a low level if the car park's not in use. Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Bryn. Andrew, do you want to come back in on that one?
If there's any other questions, I'll
come to the end? Okay. Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much, Chair. Concurring really with Councillor Bromfield and with Councillor Bryn. Is there any more detail on the new planting? My concern would be that this should be native hedging species, whether that's available or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Totally agree. I was just going to say almost not exactly the same as Councillor Bryn about permeable surface, because it's quite an extensive area that's going to be covered. So think of some more innovative ways to protect the flora and fauna. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, and thanks, Andrew, for the presentation. I'm in agreement with many of the other members here today. I'm really pleased to see all the biodiversity enhancements, such as the hedgerows, trees, landscaping, bird boxes, etc. Just the one question. Does the car park offer electric charging spaces, or are there any at all on site? Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Howells.
Yeah, just briefly. We noticed that there's an entrance to the Kevin Tiller quite nearby. Is that the route the minibus would be taking to take passengers? And also, is there any indication of the number of journeys likely to be made by the minibus as well?
Andrew, there's nobody else on that.
Just in terms of some of the comments then in terms of the finishes to the parking service.
Andrew, Councillor Birch has come back in, so just let her in.
Sorry. Yes, I think looking at it, my concern is that you could have cars coming round. I realise highways have not raised this as a concern, but the potential, you've got people there late at night milling about, and I'm wondering whether there is a need for some warning signage, or like others, I think the provision of the overflow car park is in itself unproblematic, and also that there should be whether there should be a safe walking route to the hall itself. The minibuses may not be available at all times, and people may be wanting to leave.
Okay, back to you, Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Chair. In terms of the finishes, particularly with reference to the parking surface, I think that there's flexibility within that condition that that whatever is used is up to us within our gift to control through that condition. As I said, there will be a need for the applicant to also require and obtain permission under the SAB approval body, so whatever the finish is, will need to achieve that sustainable urban drainage solution. So be that through grasscrete or another means, those processes should line up so that the agreed solution to the discharging condition reflects what's been given under SAB, and that potentially could be grasscrete with potentially the need for additional drainage caught and captured and conditioned under the SAB approval, but that's very much within the gift of the condition to agree that, and obviously needs to be respectful of the, in a landscape sense, let alone land drainage sense, also needs to be respectful of the very sensitive setting. In terms of the query with regards to lighting, the way that the condition is worded is it's requiring an appropriate lighting plan. If members were concerned about its hours of use or anything like that, I mean, I suppose the condition could be amended to suggest an appropriate lighting plan, including details. I mean, it does say provide details of lighting position specification. That list of items it's covering could also include schedule of times of use, something to that effect, which would then form part and parcel of a lighting plan should the need arise. I say it's not proposed as it is, but that condition there is to capture that in the event. So that could be amended to include, in addition to positioning, specification, type, schedule of hours of use, and when, something to that effect. That could be quite easily captured within that existing condition if members were minded to approve. That's a simple amendment. Just to clarify, no, there aren't any EV charging points proposed. In terms of the entrance point to Kevin Tiller, to just north of the site, actually, that then leads off a single track, so not aware that that's not a two-way entrance or exit. When I've ever been to the site, I've always entered the site for previous applications, you had to sort of the southern exit, southern entrance, but there aren't sort of signs up to prohibit people from coming that entrance. I think that is just down to the day-to-day management, particularly of events of the scale of weddings, that access would likely to be used as an exit that's most closely to the north. But in terms of vehicle movements and trips generated, again, that's the evidence has been borne out in the transport statement, and highways are fully accepting of that. In terms of a walking route, I think owing to the location, the absence of pavements along the carriageway, and the absence of street lighting, etc., and the nature of the land use that this car park area is serving, I think, I'm not sure it would be appropriate to try and establish that, which would also mean crossing the highway, so that's outside of the applicant's ownership and control, as would any warning signage that would need to be placed adjacent to the highway would be outside of the applicant's ownership and control. In terms of the safety of the site and cars or minibuses egressing and entering the site, again, that's been considered in detail. The displays, the access are considered to be safe from a highways perspective, that vehicles entering and exiting can be seen and can see oncoming traffic. So whilst those points are well made and noted, I say some of the matters outside of the applicant's responsibility and remit, but conclusively there is not considered to be a detrimental harm to road users.
Okay, thanks for that, Andrew. Nobody else has indicated they want to come back in. So we have a recommendation for approval. Would somebody like to propose that? With Councillor Butler and seconded by Councillor McConnell.
Is this approval, sorry, with added conditions?
Yeah, I've just been reminded of that. You recorded the additional conditions.
Yeah, it's to add to condition 7, so where it's requiring an appropriate lighting plan, including low-level PIR lighting, details of lighting type, positioning and specification. That should now also include details of hours of use, words to that effect, that if members are happy for officers to finalise that wording, that would satisfy some of the concerns raised in terms of when the car park's not being used effectively, so it wouldn't be lit during non-use.
Okay.
Sorry, would the native species for the hedging be in that as well? Or is it listed somewhere I haven't seen it?
Yeah, Councillor Byrne, I'll bring you back in now in a minute.
It's okay, thanks.
Do you want to come in now?
Yeah, condition 4 covers full details of the landscaping, and that would be so that the details and species, etc., would need to be submitted to us for consultation with our senior landscape officer, who obviously would be looking for native species and those that sort of complement that already on site, and also in terms of factoring and benefiting that in with biodiversity as well. So that's very much within the gift and remit of what condition 4 is seeking.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Byrne.
Yeah, it was about the additional planted parking surface rather than a gravel surface, so that it maintained the green aspect.
Yeah, again, I think that's still within the gift of condition 4, which I'll just read verbatim, is hard landscape materials to include surfacing, suds, fencing. So grasscrete would be potentially something that could fit within that description. It's, that's for the details to be submitted, and us for then to sort of work with colleagues in SAB and the landscape officer to arrive at an appropriate solution for sustainable drainage, for surface water management, and for the landscape sensitivities as well. So I think that can still be achieved through the way that condition 4 is drafted in the committee report.
Yeah, because currently the plan show gravel is all.
Yeah, but noted, Councillor Byrne, that's fine. So coming back to where we were, we've had proposals for, Councillor Bond, you've just popped up on the bottom of the screen.
Just to confirm then, Andrew, that would be added that the preference is for some sort of sustainable, because my concern is if it's not written down, then it might get lost in the process.
The condition refers, say, in a generic way, to hard landscaping. So that could include grasscrete, for example, as has been put forward. But in terms of insurance of it to be sustainable and being SAB compliant, that will have to be achieved and secured through a separate consent from the SAB team. Failure to do that, would lead the applicant potential enforcement action through the SAB team. But we obviously will overlap with them and work with them as a consultee on the discharge condition with the landscape officer. So it won't be left.
Thank you.
Okay, is anybody else going to stick their hand up just as I'm about to say something else? Councillor Howell.
With the lighting, could they be PIR activated, like so they reduced to low level when not in use, but when needed they can be brought up to full strength, as well as being turned off when not in use?
Yeah, that is specified in the condition, and I think adding to that will give more teeth to the details. The lighting plan that would be submitted, if needed, would be covered by that updated condition, and it is purporting to use PIR lighting. And again, those details will be subject to consultation with ecology, with highways, and with our landscape officer as well, to make sure that whilst if it's needed, it's safe, but also it doesn't sort of cause harm to the landscape or to local biodiversity.
Okay, under those circumstances, we have a proposal for acceptance. It's been seconded. Is everybody happy now with the conditions? Yeah? Yep. Thumbs up online? Yeah, okay, thanks very much. In that case, Richard, we'll have the voting function, please. And everybody vote now then. We're one short.
Is that Steve who's nipped for a comfort break?
Well, we don't need him, so do you want to declare on that?
Yeah, so that's approved. That's 14 for approval.
Okay, thanks everybody for that. We go to the last item on the agenda now, 4.3, which is application DM 2023/01259. This is the core shop in Caldicot. Andrew.
Yep, thank you again, Chair. So as you said, this is a full application for the change of use of the ground floor of a building in the centre of Caldicot. This is from an A1 use to a mixed use, consisting of A1, D2 and D1 uses. And just to confirm, the application is presented to you today, members, at the request of the local ward member, Maria Stevens. So the application, which is retrospective, relates to the material change of use of the building only. Internal works that have been undertaken do not require the benefit of planning permission, however would be required to obtain separate consent under building regulations. So the matters before you today relate only to land use planning issues. So just to run through the slides on screen, so that's the site there, the building edged in red, say located along the centre of Caldicot, along Newport Road. And that's for the floor plan. This relates to the ground floor only. And you can see there the primary use of the mix still to be retail, but you can see there the soft play area, as well as the skate ramp in the back of the building, as Phil is helpfully showing on screen. So just look through some of the photographs I think we've got now. So this is the aforementioned skate ramp that is located to the rear of the building. Members that were there with us yesterday will have seen that. So that forms part of the D2 sort of leisure use that comprises the mix here. I think there's some further photographs of that. And that's the existing roller shutter door that can access that part of the building. So this is the sort of long, more sort of narrow slip of the building that's been used, seeking permission to be used for soft play. Again, this would be a sort of a D2 use in terms of that leisure side of things. It has been sort of temporarily taken out with items in for Christmas put in, but what it is seeking permission for is for that to form part of a D2 use in the realms of the mix, seeking consent. So these photos just show now the primary and overriding use would still be the A1. So this is just photographs from the building showing that principal sort of retail offering. That's looking back towards the front of the building, again with say that main retail focus. Okay, so this is say some of the sort of, in terms of the D1 use and the sort of community use, there are a more sort of flexible space towards the rear of the building that could be used for coffee mornings or sort of classes, sort of community-based classes for all sorts of sort of say community-led projects. But that would be an area where people could come in and sit down, discuss these things, coffee mornings, say for example. That's just, so there's no hot food provided, just to confirm, so it's not seeking any sort of form of A3 consent. It's very much a kettle for a cup of tea, etc. Things are very much of that scale. And that's the rear of the building there. You can see accessed right back around to the public car park opposite the football ground that we parked outside yesterday. So, in terms of our evaluation and assessment of the application, and turning, as we should, to principle, the site, and say we're concerned with the ground floor, the site is within the primary shop frontage and within a central shopping area, and therefore falls to be considered under policies RET1 and RET2 of the adopted LDP. Policy RET1 sets out on the ground floor of properties within the primary shop frontages, uses should be A1, A2 or A3. And in this instance, permission is now sought to use the premises as a mixed use, although the majority of the floor area would still be used for A1, with a small area at the back being used for the D1 and D2 uses. The D uses are proposed and seeking consent are considered to be complementary to the broader A1 use, and is not considered that the loss of the rear of the unit for retail would adversely affect the overall availability of retail space within the wider town centre. The development is considered to accord with the more recent advice given in Planning Policy Wales and with the objectives behind the policy of RET1, and that it would protect both the vitality and viability of the town centre as it would attract footfall, for example, the soft play area becoming a destination for parents and guardians with younger children. So therefore, having regard to both local and national planning policy, the development is considered to provide a complementary and not competitive use in terms of the retail offering that would not undermine the vitality of Caldicot Town Centre, and is therefore considered acceptable in principle. In terms of neighbour and residential amenity, both 41 and 43 Newport Road have residential accommodation at first floor level. The skateboard ramps that you've seen at the very back of the building are accessed via a door at the rear. And whilst it is acknowledged that there would be some noise generated by users of the ramps, these are at the very rear of the flat roof part of the building, approximately 40 metres from the residential flats, and officers are satisfied that this would not have an unacceptable impact. This is a town centre location where there is a presumption that there would be higher levels of background noise. And this view has been confirmed by the Council's Environmental Health Officer, who has reviewed the information and also carried out a site visit. But further to this point, a condition is proposed limiting the hours of operation of the skate ramp facility to finish by 8 p.m. And finally, just to confirm also that there is no objection proposed to the mixed use from the Council's highway engineer in respect of highway safety. Finally, and as a point of correction, owing to the retrospective nature of the application, an amendment to condition 4, as set out in the officer report, is proposed to account for this, which would now read as follows, should members endorse the recommendation to approve the application. So the amended condition 4 would read as follows. Within 3 months of the date of this decision, a scheme of ecological enhancement to provide net benefit to biodiversity shall be submitted to the local planning authority for approval in writing. This shall include full details of the location, a specification of ecological enhancements, and a timetable for their implementation. The approved details should be implemented in their entirety in accordance with the agreed timetable and shall be retained in perpetuity. That's the end of that condition, the amended condition. So in conclusion, having regard to all relevant national and local planning policies in respect of town centre and planning land use policies, the development is considered acceptable and subject to that updated condition 4 recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And I note that Caldicot Town Council have recommended refusal. I think it's fair to say at this time there's been an awful lot of discussion about ancillary matters which are not part of the planning remit. They would be for other agencies with the necessary powers. So anybody wishing to speak, can we stick to planning matters, please? Anybody wish to speak? There's nobody put their hand up at the moment. No. Councillor Bryn.
Yeah, I understand that these proposals face a number of objections for a myriad of reasons that don't appear to be on planning grounds. Are there any additional conditions that we can add beyond the noise restrictions that might go some way to alleviate some of those concerns and fears? And is there any condition we can add to the car park exit, to the improvement to the car park exit that would improve the safety and amenity of the outdoor space there? And one last thing, with the condition 4, the ecological enhancement provision, I just wondered what that would look like with with this plan. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of any other conditions to alleviate some of those concerns outside the plan, well, no, we can't duplicate control under other bodies, be it fire safety regulatory services, be it building control. We can't condition matters that overlap with other consenting regimes. And any planning condition has to have regard to Welsh Government's planning circular and be reasonable, necessary, etc. to make the development acceptable. And our officer's view is that the conditions are set out, subject to that small amendment, are appropriate, reasonable, and proportionate to the mixed use that's seeking consent. So our advice to you as members would be that no further conditions are considered necessary to mitigate any planning harm. Say areas outside of our remit are just that, and not for us to try and condition and control things that duplicate elsewhere. In terms of the safety, amenity, etc., of that rear exit, I mean, it does enter out onto the public car park. And in terms of, there is an element of, with control and management of the site, and that being the responsibility of the proprietor, inside and outside the building, that is beyond our control. Like I said, that car park can be used by the members, but it's obviously been historically used when the building has been in a more conventional retail use. But again, no objection was offered by our highways engineers, who would have sort of looked at the scheme in its totality and factored in with their own sort of views. I don't think any further conditions is necessary to make the development acceptable or to mitigate any overriding planning harm.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew, for the presentation. I'm in favour of this development regarding the mixed use of this building. I think the viability of the High Street has changed over recent years, and in particular since COVID, with many high streets suffering greatly. As a parent of relatively young children myself, I don't live in Caldicot, but if I did, I would very much welcome this sort of development, knowing that my children are in a safe space, a warm space, and at the same time, if I was to take them there, I could then go off and do whatever I wanted to do within the town, and bring money to the town and drive the local economy. There was a piece in the report that really summed it up nicely for me. It said the 2 play areas will enhance the vitality and viability of the town centre by encouraging footfall as they are destination uses. The site is accessible and in a sustainable location. Such uses should be encouraged as bringing people into the town centre who are then likely to utilise the other facilities within the town. So yeah, I'm all in favour of this and recommend approval. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Butler.
Really just echoing what Councillor McKenna has just said. In particular, the soft play area will appeal to mums with small children, and there's always a desperate need for activities for older children, boys in particular. I know girls do skate. So I would welcome it if my children were younger. I would definitely, be heading there, as it were. Just one point there. I believe that at the back there, where the roller door is, I believe the space behind is not the public car park. It's actually land belonging to the landlord, and the car park is at a slightly different level. Thank you very much.
Okay, while Andrew's looking at that, Councillor Rook.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Bryn, I had concerns around the pedestrian access to the skate park area of the development. As you leave those double doors, yes, that is the land is owned by the landlords up to the point where the access road into the car park comes in. But people will be parking there that are using that area anyway, whether it's the soft play area, the skate park, or the shop. And so I would like to see a dedicated pedestrian access off the rear of the premises, out of the site if at all possible. Whether we can ask for that to be done, I'll leave that to the officers to tell me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rook. Andrew, do you want to come back in on that lot?
Sorry, just trying to be clear. So it's seeking a dedicated pedestrian access
to the skate park area through the double doors at the rear.
Right. Would it be useful to have the floor plan, perhaps, on the screen, just to help clarify? Okay, so is this in reference, if Phil could just slide his cursor over?
Chair, can I just interject?
Yeah, go on.
That there is a raised area by the roller shutter doors, has been suggested by Councillor Butler, I think, which is raised so the cars wouldn't be parking on there, but if there was some restriction to make sure that no one could park on there, and that it was designated for the entrance and egress from that roller shutter door, that would be useful. Thank you.
Right, so there's an existing double doors, it's just up from there, sorry Phil, that leads into the, was that the...
There's a single door and a roller shutter door, so I'm not sure that's actually accurate. If you go back to the pictures, you'll see the picture of the skate park, you'll see the two, because we went out the door, didn't we, not the roller shutter door, or we looked yesterday.
Yeah, that's the area now that your pointer's on.
Yeah, so if you go back to the picture of the skate park area, you'll be able to see there, look, there's a double door, but there's a roller shutter next to it.
We actually exited the building through that double door, didn't we?
That's
actually correct, no, we didn't go through that double door in the end. We went through the other double door.
But we looked out, didn't we?
Yeah.
It's raised out. It's raised outside that double door.
No, so it isn't raised, it's actually the car park that's raised. That's area outside the roller blind and the double door is actually part of the landlord's land. I don't think there were any cars or anything out there at all. And the car park is actually raised.
It's actually the old loading bay.
Yes.
Because all the supplies for the shop used to come in through those double doors, and that area outside was for the delivery vehicle.
A quick save, yeah, absolutely.
So I'm just looking at obviously the red. Any additional conditions that you'd be looking to impose here? Obviously, you do have to have regard to the red line boundary of the application site. We can't condition anything or any works to take place outside of that. And if not, so that's in the presentation, but you can see that there. So,
Would that come under health and safety?
No, I think, well, I mean, the principal point in terms of I take your point in terms of health and safety, and like I said, other consenting regimes are there, but the safety of the building would come under building control and building regulations. Environmental health would be there in terms of, you know, any sort of some of the food preparation, although that is very limited, etc. But we can't condition any features or details to be agreed, notwithstanding that it's also retrospective, that are outside of the red line boundary. I think at the minute there isn't anything prohibiting users of the skate park entering the site through the front off Newport Road. I mean, that's down to the way that the building is managed and run by the proprietor there, there is an existing safer, I'm sure we'd all agree, entrance through the building to the rear. But any conditions you seek to control or limit alternative point of access do have to have regard to the red line boundary and not try and achieve any additional means of a safer access that sit outside of that, because a condition would fail then. So I think that is also, would give weight to the fact that there is a safe access to the front, that whoever it is that's using the skate park, boys, girls, children of all ages, could use the front of the building to gain access. There's no impediment for them going through the unit safely from the front from Newport Road.
When we were on the site visit yesterday, the gentleman we met there specified that the use of the skate park would be, or access to the skate ramp area would be via the roller doors to the rear, and not through the main shopping area. If that's their intention, then that does cause some health and safety issues that we should be considering as a planning committee.
Sorry, I'm just looking at a Google map of this now, and there does seem to be an overhang there, so that does seem quite. Cars seem to be parking sort of at right angles to that area anyway, allowing for a clear way.
It's a general. Well, as I say, it was the loading bay for the shop. There were a couple of vehicles, vans, parked there yesterday. It doesn't actually form part of the public car park.
Right.
It's just a little bit of ancillary area that's used by traders.
And is owned by the landlord of the building.
Yes, go on, Jill.
Sorry, beg your pardon. If you see, there's a little blip on the actual plan that you're showing there that isn't within the red line. So maybe that should be within the red line.
Well, that would be the raised area.
Yeah.
To just outside the doors.
Hmm.
That's the area. Is it necessary to make the application acceptable? That's the question, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, struggling to think what sort of condition members would be seeking to address some of these sort of broader health and safety concerns. And I suppose, as I mentioned earlier, about the 6 tests that need to be satisfied for any planning condition to make a development acceptable. And like I said, in terms of the access to the building, in highway safety, and any conflict then between people exiting the building on foot or wheelchair, for example, to the rear, and cars using that space in front of it. So we've got no objection on record from the council's highways engineers. I do accept that there's, the concerns from a general health and safety perspective, but I'm not sure there's sort of sufficient planning harm there that a condition is reasonable or necessary to make that mixed use, certainly in regard to the rear of the site, acceptable. But that's just an officer's view, but I'm not sure what else would be proportionate or reasonable to secure to alleviate what, say, more broader health and safety concerns.
Would there be any point in some sort of barriers to stop children running out of there? Like you'd have at the end of a footpath? Only a thought.
As it's outside of the red line boundary of the application, which means that we have no control what goes on outside of it. Could we put an advisory note on there that they look at safe public access to the rear of the building?
That's probably a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. An advisory note by way of informative could be included with any planning permission be minded to grant, advising on that particular point. But in terms of, we couldn't agree a scheme of bollards or whatever, again, for the reason that it's outside of the red line boundary, so any condition would fail the appropriate test. But that is a sensible suggestion. We can highlight it as an advice note that the applicant would need to consider and take on board, notwithstanding any other consents and permissions that are needed to operate the site for the use that's being sought permission.
Okay, I think we're
Chair, sorry, could we just ask also to protect that roller shutter door from being accidentally rammed, or anybody driving into it accidentally and there being young people on the other side of it? So some sort of restriction would be useful, possibly.
So that could be dealt with in the wording for the advisory, couldn't it? So, yeah, point well made. Right, subject to that discussion, we've had a. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just wanted to clarify the sort of latest position then before a recommendation is taken. If it is voted to approve, that would be on the basis of the updated condition 4, as I read verbatim earlier, as well as the information note, the informative to be attached regarding consideration of pedestrian safety at the rear exit of the site also. Just wanted to, for the record, just to clarify on those 2 additional items or amended items.
Okay, so we've had a proposal from Councillor McKenna, seconded by Councillor Powell. Can we have the voting function up, please? Can everybody vote now then, please? It's 13, I think Councillor Webb's had to go, hasn't she?
Yeah, it should still be one more. Okay, so that one's approved, 13 for approval.
Okay, well that concludes the formal business of the meeting. If everybody could just hang on a second while Richard...
Important stuff.
Yeah, while Richard stops the recording.